Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Ask Me Anything session. So this is an integral part of our Learn on Return program that we offer here at AlmaBetter. So every week we organize a AMS session where we invite experienced data science professionals to enlighten us about the industry and the career prospects it holds for beginners. Right. So these sessions are very insightful for students who are building a career in the data science field, right? But we also understand that effective time management and goal setting are equally important in terms of aspirants successfully making a transition into their dream career, right? So in that regard, today we have a very special guest, Mr. Suman Shekhar. Welcome to the session, Suman, and thank you for taking the time out for doing this session for our
Hi,
students.
Shivam. Great to be here. I'm no data scientist, but a privilege to be invited here by you.
Definitely, I'll just introduce you briefly. So, Suman is an IFS officer currently posted at the Embassy of India in Madrid. He is also an IIT Delhi alumnus. He graduated from IIT Delhi in 2016 and worked as a software engineer at Samsung. One of the really commendable things about Suman is that he cracked the UPSC exam while he was still working at Samsung. Right. So let's hear the rest of the story from Suman himself. So, Suman, could you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Well, thank you so much, Shivam. You are more or less summed it up. So I did electrical engineering from IIT Delhi.
Mhm.
There in my summer internship, I was at Samsung, got a pre-placement offer, so joined there. I was in the blockchain team, so I
Mhm.
started some work on blockchain and Internet of Things there. But at the same time, I wanted to move abroad, so I applied to a couple of master's programs, and I always had this idea of applying for the civil services, so did it on the side and got into the foreign service, thankfully. So joined it, and my first posting was in Madrid, where I learned Spanish. And currently, I'm posted here as a second secretary, looking after economic and political affairs between the two countries.
That's wonderful. That's great to know, Suman. So, as I can figure out that IFS was not an obvious choice for you, as you were also interested in the core research domain and had many other career options for you, right? So, my next question derives from that. So, could you tell us why you chose to become an IFS officer, and what were some of the key factors into instrumental in this decision making?
Sure. So, well, I was always, the child interested in the civil services because I was born and brought up in Bihar, and there's this craze of civil services around. Then, when I came to IIT, I explored many different things, but policy was one of them which really interested me. So, I remember one of my humanities courses called Science, Technology, Human Development. I really liked that. So, I always had this idea that while research, etc., is important, but on the same uh, at the same time, you need good policy inputs and these sorts of things. When I was in Samsung also, so I really appreciated that I was working for a Korean company which had invested a lot of money in India and with Indian engineers. But I also noted that the office we were working in was a special economic zone. So in some sense, there were some incentives, tax incentives given by the government, which helped them to set it up there. So yeah, I wanted to move abroad, and IFS offered a very diverse perspective. As in, normally people go to the US or UK, they stay there for all of their lives, but here I can move around countries, learn about different cultures, and also represent my country, which is a great privilege. So I've had some multilateral meetings where I sat in front of the flag, and then where whatever you speak is not what me, Suman, speaking, but it is more like a statement of India. So great learning experience, and at a personal level also, I was very good at hard skills, as we would attest to, but not so much in soft skills. So I was not so much of an outgoing person. So I thought that when I join a job like this, I can build on those skills at a personal level.
That's great to know. So many learnings and a very important role that you play for representing India, right? So my next question to you is about time management skills, as it is very important for all the data science aspirants at AlmaBetter as to how to work effectively towards their goal, right? So you cleared the civil services examinations, which is one of the toughest exams to crack in India, with a very broad syllabus. Effective time management kind of becomes very, very important, right? So could you help our students understand how to strategize their routine so that they always have a bird's eye view of the mission and at the same time are committed towards fulfilling their smaller goals at everyday level.
Yeah, so let me add the disclaimer that what I'm going to say is what worked for me may not necessarily work for everyone. Different people have different approaches. Um, but I think, yeah, time management is really important. You need to have an idea of what you want to do. So it's always good to break it up. Even today, when I go to my ambassador with a difficult project, something new comes up, and he just says, break it up and then approach it. So break up this big problem of being a good data scientist into smaller parts, and set up some short, medium, long-term targets, and work on them, I suppose. Also, just have some sort of a planner or tracker. So for some people, maybe a whiteboard works. For some people, maybe some app works. But
Mhm.
yeah, keep something to track it. And also on all of these small subheadings, you need to prioritize a lot. So especially as a working professional, even in your jobs, we all have to prioritize that this task is important. So what used to happen with me in my college days was I had a lot of time. So if there's any assignment, I would give a lot of time to it. But today I'm like, is this level acceptable? If I can stop it there, I'll stop it. So it's like the 80-20 rule, where you
Yes.
can do 80% of the work in 20% of the time. So go for it.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think those are important.
Yeah, these are some of the beautiful insights that you gave, right? So,
I mean,
how
there's
to
nothing
prioritize
new here.
things,
Yeah.
right? So, it's kind of becomes very important, right? When you have whole lot of things to do, how do you prioritize as to which activity gives you the maximum ROI, right? So, before I move on to the next question, I would like our attendees to, please post your questions in the AMA section so that we can take them up. So, we want to keep this interactive. So, now let's talk a little bit about goal setting, right? So as we all know, the cadre strength for IFS is quite low, right? It ranges between 30-35% annually. So getting through must have, required quite of, dedication and effective goal setting. So could you share some of the goal setting tips that students could imbibe in their life to achieve their own goals?
Yeah, I mean, goal setting keeps on going on all through your career. So even after you clear the exam, there's so much of pressure to, live up to the standards, and it's a continuous learning process. You go to different positions, you have to do different things. So today I'm in an embassy, it's a bilateral relationship, but maybe I'll go to UN in the future where it's a multilateral relationship. Maybe I'll
Correct.
go to something specific like disarmament, where I would need some specific knowledge. So you, I think, need to keep on updating your skills all the time. So coming back
Right.
to your question of goal setting, like I said, that you need to have short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. And you need to have some idea of how realistic your goals are, or better,
Mhm.
you need to have some sort of risk profile for the goal. So think about it like a probability distribution. Maybe you're aiming for something which is really difficult and great, but understand that you need to put in more time, and even if you put in more time, there'll be some luck element.
Correct.
So based on that, I mean, depending on your personal risk appetite, I think you should have career goals, study goals, whatever, just mix them up.
Correct.
uh,
Yes.
and the ROI, as you mentioned, is really
Mhm.
important. So for instance, for me, when I was preparing for the exam, if the
Mhm.
medieval history requires 100 hours of study, and maybe it just contributes to one 5-mark question, which,
Mhm.
in which I can get 2 or 3 marks anywhere without putting in those 100 hours, maybe I could skip it.
Correct.
So similarly here, I mean, you could just map it to your professional career. What is important, what is not important.
Mhm.
uh, and I must say that a lot of things just come with experience and prioritization, etc. So in my college days, I remember I did not set any goals, and I was the guy who would attend all the classes, make all the notes, but I would lose them. And
Right.
eventually, like many of us in the, I think, in who have joined us today, so you would all go to this person whose notes were available in the photocopy shop, and you would
Mhm.
just get it, study from them, and then do it.
Right.
So try to avoid that if at all possible. You try to
Right.
organize yourself well.
No, I guess no, definitely. So I guess that's the reason why in our curriculum also we try to imbibe all of these, right? So how do you maximize your output? Given many of them are working professionals in our curriculum, in our program. So we try to give unrealistic deadlines, but 100% completion is not required. Maybe if you
Mhm.
are able to complete 80% of the job, in maybe 1 or 2 hours, that is kind of good, right? And that's the reason why we try to imbibe all of these learnings, right? Because they quick through these deadlines, right? So they uh, learn how to prioritize things, right? So that is kind of very important. Of course, and whenever you are chasing such big goals, right, so there are a lot of things to do, and it's very, very important to prioritize, right? So my next question to you, Suman, is I really feel that great interpersonal skills are required for managing international relations, right? In your opinion, how important are these skills for creating and maintaining meaningful relationships in any workplace?
No, definitely, you're absolutely right. So, like I was mentioning, soft skills are very important in international relations, especially so because
Mhm.
a lot of what you're doing is soft. You're exercising soft power, so you don't really have any hard power over your interlocutors, but you're trying to make your point heard. You're trying to come towards common positions, and the same goes for work because at some level, I think if you look at all the most successful organizations, be it Google, Blackstone, anything, or even the best services in the government, most people who join in are talented, but the people who rise to the very top are the people who are able to get people to come to some conclusion, or move things forward. So what often happens is that very bright people, they have their ego issues, etc., and they start fighting. So people who can really communicate and get their point across is important, more so for data scientists, because
Mhm.
numbers are important, but I think it's the story behind the numbers which is
Correct.
which
Yes.
even more important.
Yep.
So for entry level roles, probably all you're trying to do is crunch up some numbers, but as you grow up,
Mhm.
you need to create that story, and communication is the key here.
That's that's very relatable, I guess. No, I guess we have one question from our audience. So
Mhm.
no, this is like a very important thing, right? So you have to be motivated continuously when you are chasing such long-term goals, right? So how to be consistent and motivated in this journey?
Well, so it depends. I think it depends on your motivations, like why are those goals in the first place.
Yep.
So if it's something which is your like your true passion, then you'll always be motivated. So for instance, I'll just tell you a story. I was in Spain. I went to a restaurant, and somewhere deep in Spain, and
Mhm.
there was this sommelier, like a someone who had studied about wine and how to serve wine. And so there was a scar in her hand, and she told that
Mhm.
while learning she cut it, and she had to get a surgery, and 6 months she couldn't do anything. But she was so motivated about it that she came back, did the same thing, and she still uses that traditional knife, which is actually pretty dangerous, but she's so
Mhm.
motivated about doing it in the traditional way. And I could see that she was so passionate about it, so that even when I don't like wine, I ordered it, just to make her happy. So I think that is like core passion. But then for
Correct.
some other people it could be something else. So it could be money, or maybe some family obligation, that you want to get a certain job with a certain amount of money.
Mhm.
So I think about those, and then just move along. um, yeah, but different things. Obviously your passion, if it matches with your goals, that's the best thing, but I'm sure we can do other things also. I mean, for all of us, there are subjects we did not like in school, but we still studied them.
Right. I guess uh, I don't know who asked this question, but I hope Suman gave a beautiful example of how passionate you have to be so that you can reach your end goal which you have uh, set for yourself, right? So it's all about how you see things, and maybe the reason why is very important, why you want to achieve that, right? So
Yeah.
figure out that why, and I guess you'll be sorted, right? Everything else will fall in place. So at AlmaBetter, we believe that talent is uniformly distributed in the society, but opportunities are not, right? So hence we came up with a pay after placement model wherein students can pay for their education only when they have landed a high paying job, right? So this essentially removes the financial barrier from education, making it accessible to everyone, right? So Suman, what are your views about this particular initiative? Do you think such initiatives are required to take us closer to the idea of education for all?
Yeah, certainly. So first of all, the topic you choose, data science, it's very important for all of us. I mean, in my policy field, I see things like people are talking about, like in Madrid, there's an organization called United Nations World Tourism Organization, and I was there at their last meeting, and they were talking about using data science to predict tourism trends and understand how can we make tourism better. So it's being applied to every field. I see people who know about these things are in senior policy positions. So, for instance, I met the Secretary of State for Artificial Intelligence in Spain, and she's someone who did a data science slash big data startup, sold it successfully, and now the government invited her to take up that position. So the idea is that as we move forward, especially after the coronavirus, growth in Europe would rest on two pillars. One would be green economy, and the other would be digitalization, and this is very important. So fantastic topic. Same goes for India, like we did the AI summit, etc. And as
Mhm.
you know, as a nation, we are moving in that direction where we use more of these latest technologies. And
Right.
coming back to your point of, I think, open education, it's really important. So it's my personal view that, I was privileged enough to study in an IIT, but how many can do
Mhm.
that? Same goes for Harvards and Stanfords of the world.
Right.
Uh, so this is one. And the second thing is that sometimes when you want to go for 2-year masters, etc., you don't have the kind of time, you don't have that kind of money, and we need to continuously upgrade our skills. So all of these platforms, I think, are very helpful to achieve that.
Right. I guess that was the whole reason why we started and picked this particular topic to begin with. So Suman, you get to represent the country at a at an international level, right? So I'm sure such roles are quite challenging. So what are some of the challenges that you have faced in your career, and how did you overcome them? So can you share some learnings?
So yeah, challenges. I think one challenge, one general challenge, which will move to a new country is, of course, the culture is different, language is different, and more so important for us diplomats because we have to interact with people here. We have to interact with government, businesses, etc. So if I were a software engineer working in some place, I'll be confined to my thing. But here, you really need to step out of your comfort zone to understand those things. And because of these cultural differences, sometimes you're playing in between. So you get some ideas from India, you get something from there, and then you have to translate in between and get people to agree. So I think
Right.
that is a very big challenge, a general challenge. Specifically for my experience, I think um, so there was this UN climate summit called COP25, which was
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be held in Chile, but there were political protests. So last minute it moved to Madrid. So I had to plan all of the Indian participation here, and that was a big challenge for me. I was new here, and I had to use my small team of the embassy from all departments to essentially focus on the climate summit. That was one challenge, and of course, in the coronavirus time, you don't know anything, so you're planning about some things, but then these things came along. So I had to plan. So, for instance, evacuation flights of Indians, take care of the Indian community in those times of distress when there was nothing, no flight connectivity, etc. Make sure that they are all safe and sound, that they don't have any problems. So yeah, those were, if you're talking about specific challenges which I had here. But yeah, great learning experience and fantastic to have served the people.
Great, great, Suman. I guess a whole lot of learnings when you have such a responsibility, right? The learnings will come by. So, I think we got a few questions in the Q&A. So, um, so there is one question. So, is there any role of a data scientist in international relations? Uh, if yes, please give us some insights about that. Is
So
there any
okay,
data being looked at for decision making at such positions?
So I would say it's a work in progress,
Okay.
not just in India but across the world. So some countries have appointed what they call as digital ambassadors. So
Mm-hmm.
for instance, I think Denmark is one of them who has appointed a digital ambassador who sits typically in San Francisco and I think moves around just to try to understand and develop connections with the big private sector companies who are working in these areas because all of these issues like regulation etc are becoming very important. So that is one area, but another also is that how can we collaborate on these initiatives? And therefore we have taken different steps. So like in our ministry we have made a new division called New Emerging and Strategic Technologies division, which looks after these things. So I'm not sure if they've had any data scientists yet, but I'm sure that it is only a matter of time before we'll have some people working over there. Also, I mean, my personal speculation that
Mhm.
let's say in the past you had different treaties about regulation of things like nuclear weapons, etc. So I
Mhm.
would say that as we go forward, we would have treaties, etc., about artificial intelligence or stuff like that. So I'm sure somewhere, people with this kind of knowledge will be involved there.
Got it. Got it. So, I guess, Mr. Sinha, you have got some of the insights, right? So, data is everywhere, and so if you know how to play around with data, gather insights from them, definitely, maybe not now, maybe in future, there is a whole lot of opportunities out there, right? So,
I'm sure the intelligence community uses it, to the more than you guys do.
right, right. Yep, yep. So we have one question from Isha, right? So no, I think it's very legit question, right? So how to deal with setbacks, right? So no, let's say we have been following a schedule and a setback comes due to a health issue, or maybe you do some things and things don't go as planned. You get some rejections in an interview. So how do you make up uh, of all of this? How do you deal with such adversities?
Well, yeah, I mean, those things do happen. Even I can personally relate. I was sick and I was very
Mhm.
sick. I used to run and I suddenly was in a position that I couldn't walk for 100 meters after having that sickness. And I think what you need to do is, I mean, setbacks do hurt. So I won't claim here that if you get a setback, they won't set you back by a couple of months or so. But you don't really need to, just think about them. You just need to say that okay, this happened and move along. Especially for failures, I think failures are okay. They happen. They should happen, and just take your learnings and move along. With other setbacks, also, I mean, life is like that. So you need to manage it in some way. So don't let circumstances define you, but you take charge of circumstances in the best way you can.
Right. Yep. So maybe you get a setback of a few months, but you can start afresh from there. So not think that okay, I have moved. So whenever you are ready, just give your best at any point of time, and that will
Right.
help, right?
And
So
sometimes you actually emerge better than you were
correct.
before
Yep.
because of that.
Because you have seen that failure or that
Yeah.
setback, right? And uh, learnings actually come from there, right? So the real learnings of life actually come from there.
Because
So
in some ways, when people
yep.
say that this person has 10 years experience, what they're talking about is these things only, what
Correct.
they learned.
Yep. Yep. So want to bring one more topic, right? So most of the students in India are not very confident about themselves and lack effective communication skills. They are almost apologetic when talking about themselves in an interview setup, which shouldn't ideally be the case, right? So you have also I guess prepared a lot for the interviews of UPSC, right? So to tackle this, we at AlmaBetter organize one-on-one mock interview sessions with working professionals every week for our students. So during the program, they interact with 50 plus mentors, right? So according to you, to what extent is this aspect of our program beneficial in helping students ace the interviews?
No, I think that is very, very important because when you're trying to join a company, one part is the hard skills part, but the other is the soft skills part and the fit part. And where you judge that is actually in these interviews only, that will this person fit well in my team? Because you can teach the rest of the stuff anyway. And a lot of these things, which we all realize, we don't realize when we are young, in college, but a lot of these things can be taught easily. So even in college, when placements are going on, if you want to do consulting, do your case interview. If you want to do coding, do these things. If you want to do UPSC, study in a particular way. So a lot of the part, at least to get a spot in the place, can just come from practice, and mock interviews are absolutely helpful. Even for me, they were before my UPSC preparation. I took some different mock interviews, and
Mhm.
they told me that what they were looking for. At least I was better off with them than I was before. So yeah, sure, practice.
Yep.
And
So yeah, that's the reason why we have inculcated this, and we put much emphasis on this aspect of the program. So we have one interesting question from Akshay. So was there any kind of culture shock when moving from a corporate environment to a government entity?
well, so for me, I actually worked in corporate for just 1 year. But
Mm-hmm.
if you talk of cultural shock, so it was not a shock, it was just different in some ways. So for instance,
Okay.
in corporate world, you
Mm-hmm.
always address people by their name usually. But in government, at least in India, you usually use sir, and there will be a hierarchy. So you need to know that if I'm at a particular level, I am going to write to only people of a particular level. If I want to go above that, I'll approach my boss, etc. Then there are some internal procedures and systems which you have to learn. Um, but not much, I would say that, especially in the foreign service, you are talking to private sector people anyway. A lot of your interlocutors are in another country. So there you have a different culture, and internally, perhaps you have a different culture. But of course, in government system, things can be a little bit slow. There can be different levels,
Mm-hmm.
but and you learn to deal with them. But for me personally, I think I'm more of a government person now, having spent 1 year there and 4 years now. So I don't know, probably people who have done 5 years in the private sector then come to the government would be able to answer it much better.
Yep. No, I guess, all of the points that you mentioned are quite, relatable. I can relate to that, right? So, um, whatever you mentioned about the corporate, maybe, no, people have a sense that governments are a bit slow, but that also comes from the levels that you have in the organization, right? So, big corporates can also be slow, right, in decision
Also
making,
complex challenges, yeah,
right?
you're right.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you, as the corporate gets bigger,
Yep.
like Fortune 500 will of course be
Right.
slower than a startup. And but when you are inside, sometimes you realize that there are these 10 variables. It's not so simple of a decision. So outside it looks like we are not doing anything, but inside, it's a complex decision and sometimes takes time. There are different stakeholders.
Right. No, I guess, slow does not mean good, right? Does not mean better, or, bad, right? So, in a monarchy, I guess, one person, makes the decision. That does not mean it's the best one. So, every framework has its own pros and cons, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, I guess we have now reached the end of this AMS session. Suman, do you have any last piece of advice to the attendees? Some advice that you would give uh, to your younger self at the start of the career?
Well, when someone just says this, I always think of the grass is green on the other side narrative. So I start thinking that maybe I shouldn't have joined engineering. It would have been better to, go to DU and study for 3 years only. But on a more serious note, I think I would have explored. Of course, everything is hindsight is 2020, but I would have explored more opportunities. So I would have tried to understand more options of doing things. So, for instance, when I was there, I would think typically that people would take a coding job, or people would go for an MBA, do IM, etc., or civil services, or maybe do a PhD and become a professor. So that is mostly what I used to think, and many of my friends also. But I never thought about, should I try a startup or should I do social entrepreneurship, etc. So if I were to go back, I would definitely think on these lines, and I would also try to find out if there's a specific topic which interests me and where I can go deeper. So for
Got it.
research, for instance, I took many courses. I really did not like any one of them, but
Mhm.
I wish I could have found something which I could have explored further.
Got it. So it's all about, exploring different things at the start of the career, so that, you get a sense of what are the different aspects wherein you can contribute, right? So I think that's all the questions that we had. Uh, so I guess one more question is left. So, uh, how do you see skills development in this changing environment, right? So how important is skills development and upskilling particularly, right? So how what's your take on it?
No, I think that is very important. So as you see, as the world shifts, people need to adapt. They have always needed to adapt, but more so now, because sometimes. So let me take an example of trading floors. So maybe 20 years ago, there was still a lot of paper or trading going on with people making phone calls, etc. But today, it's mostly all algorithmic and computerized. So many of the people who were doing that would have lost their jobs had they not learned the new computer things. Similarly, as we talk about artificial intelligence and automation, people need to learn new skills, even in the government. So so for instance, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, if I were in Spain doing the same thing, I would probably read some newspapers, try to get some information, skim it, and then send some reports to New Delhi. And it would be a very great value add because there was no way of knowing what's happening there. But today, everyone has the same piece of information through the internet. So, how do you add value? So, I need to go ahead and maybe get some other information which is not readily available on media platforms, etc. Maybe I need to learn new skills. So, for instance, when I'm making a report, earlier you could just write text, but today people are using graphics, etc. All of these data science things. So maybe we need to do more analysis. So I think it is true for everyone, and the only way to approach is like take out some time and study it, or talk to people who have those skills and learn from them.
Right, right. I guess, learning never stops. And
Yes.
if you want to be relevant in this changing world, you have to keep upskilling, right? So even if you are a data scientist, it's not the end, right? It's the beginning, because this field in particular is very evolving, and every day new research papers, and the progress is very fast, right? Because a
Yeah.
whole lot of company are investing in these technologies, right? So I guess you constantly need to upskill yourself, right? So I guess that's all the questions that we had. We have covered all the questions from the audience. So thank you so much, Suman, for this insightful session. Your answers were extremely beneficial and enlightening for our attendees. Again, it was lovely to have you here today, Suman.
No, thank you so much, Shivam, for your time, and thank you so much to my friend Ravi for inviting me here. Um, he was actually a hostel mate in IIT, and we
Uh-huh.
both come from the same high school.
Yep.
So thank you so much, Ravi, and thanks a lot for all the people who joined here.
Thanks, Suman. Thanks so much for your time. I know you have had a busy schedule whole this week, but taking out time, I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
So to our audience, so that was Suman, joined us from Madrid. So this is Shivam signing off. We'll have a new guest next week. See you then. Thank you.